ade na ekuso yesusu se yenkwa na yebenya enkwaje esan se yegiri se Yesu Kristo ba oba asase no obewu ye di moja etoye according to Acts chapter 20 verse 28. Saa die we na nkemofo so enyimie ne saa yo ntina ye de yegiri se nkemofo ni na ebekọ bunsem gem. Islam is a false religion. Question way a question a nkemoni epusa okristo ni se why is my religion wrong?
Jesus is a prophet, Prophet Isa, within the Muslim culture. So, as a Muslim, like, we respect other religions. We call them people of the book. If you respect another religion, there's no wrong religion in that essence. Like, from your standpoint, because I am Muslim, because I have an imam who is not a messenger but an interpreter, is my religion wrong or askew in any context?
Memo bibia kwa aba eba Atom TV GH eso na nyankopon hyira papa sempo wonya adaje a odehwe dwumadi na meka wo se wunya unsubscribe ya subscribe se na be ya se ye new video etuma ubenya notification no na ene menu mienu eba behwe eye asemisa we another topic we is Christianity the only way to heaven? Is Christianity the only way unto salvation? Eye kusosum kuto na enkwaje ewom ana. Se anu ye ni e ane dia ene na Hinduism, Buddhist for ene inkremofo omugina bia ewo hefa. Na ene eye debate kakra bi na menu mienu eba behwe na ya dwendwene eho. Na ansa na yebekwa akọhe saa debate na na se yebekwa akọhe saa video no. Maminka emunsem kakra bi nkyerɛ onuadɔfo wotemi asɛm wo ya menu mienu ehwe ehu pa yie sɛ ɛyɛ nkremofo na ɛka nokra ɛne na ekusofo nyinaa bɛkɔ he sɛ ɛyɛ ekusofo nso na ɛka nokra na nkremofo nyinaa nso ɛde ɛkɔ he nti ɛyɛ asɛm a ehu ana meno ɛdwendweno ɛho saa no na se yeba nkremosum a nkremofo agitum se ane Yesu Kristo oyo odifo na onye onyankopon omugitum se woye prophet Isa a no oye very good prophet a boni bia eni ne ho afi nso se yehwe nkremosum nso a nkremofo esanso agitum biam se Yesu Kristo wambewu enye nipa boni ntina Yesu Kristo obaaye enti we ne enkyerɛkyerɛ a nkemofo ekurem enti saa enkyerɛkyerɛ we eye nokra dia ene na kristosom ekristofo nina ebekɔ bunsem gem esan se eye saa gidie we na kristosom egina se Yesu Kristo obewuye yesie no na osɔre na ne saye no so na kristosom eba ewiase enti se kristosom nokra dia na nkremofo ebekɔ bunsem gem se nkremofo nso na eka nokra dia na ekristofo nina ede ebekɔ bunsem gem na we eye video na se debate a enche menu mienu ebekɔ akɔhɛ we nkremoni bi na okusa okristoni se why is my religion wrong? Ade ntina ekristofo yesusu se yenko na yebekɔ efense heaven. Ade na ekristofo yesusu se yenko na yebenya enkwaje esan se yegiri se Yesu Kristo ba oba asase no obewu ye di moja etoye according to Acts chapter 20 verse 28. Saa die we na nkremofo so enyimie ne saa yo ntina ye de yegiri se nkremofo ni na ebekɔ bunsem gem. Islam is a false religion. Question we question a nkremoni epusa okristoni se why is my religion wrong? Na okristoni no oyina no maako a eye very interesting a menu mienu yebekɔ akɔakɔhɛ na question no enie question a nkremoni no pusa okristoni ne se ampa ogitum se Yesu Kristo oyodifo afa nkremosom no omo respect other religions especially Christian and I say the Christians. They call Christians the people of the book. sana nkrimofo efre ekristofo. Enti question is why is my religion wrong? Na anu ya eye sofo no edema nkrimuni say ane Muhammad onshene ni any problem bia. Esan say wohwe Muhammad a oyade yie pa say olidi Arabfo no from polytheism to monotheism. Na Arabfo no omukura nyamesum bebre. Nanso Muhammad baaye no obetwe wo madwene si Nyankopɔn ba akopeso. Muhammad oyade e wo ho. Afe nkemufo omosom no omoya adoye yie pa adoye wom enti no nkemufo ohonso no ye bobo omo abaso e wo ho. Na baby baako a episofo ye no omo enya adwene ye the deity of Christ, the identity of Jesus Christ. Ehona na Muhammad ye no enya adwene say the sofo no ekyekere no. Quran teaches that Jesus is not God. Nkremosom omuko an che say Yesu Kristo onye onyankopon, but he is just a good prophet. Now so say ye hwe okunkuma ye hwe Bible ni ma John chapter 8 verse 58 say ye hwe the gospel Matthew, Mark, Luke and John. Omuni na eklemu say Jesus onyankopon. Jesus died for mankind. Until 500 years later, Muhammad by one more whom Yesu da one thing in Kanda, and I say, well, who need that? One more money Yesu nanti ye, one more money Yesu two inside the ye, I say, Yesu Christo, o kremu say o yonyankopon. Emma say, John chapter 8, verse 58, Yesu Christo eka same be said, before Abraham was, I am. The word I am no se ko Old Testament but se ko apamda da ni mu a eye eja nyankopon ono na eyisu I am. Yesu I am edema God the Father in the Old Testament. Now so Yesu Christo ebe kan say I am. Before Abraham was I am, meaning he is claiming to be God. And that instant no Jew for no and Pharisee for no sesa abo say omo beto abon esan say or friend who say we onyankopon because of the word I am. And say ye gospel ni ma Matthew, Mark, Luke and John no sa gospel ni na che say Yesu Kristo onyankopon Yesu Kristo yekun no owuye na osore. Now so Muhammad about 500 years later no see Yesu Kristo onyankopon afi wambewu. Enti yanko hesa video imresisi ya yeba yediaka ebeso so.
Jesus is a prophet, Prophet Isa, within the Muslim culture. So, as a Muslim, like, we respect other religions, we call them people of the book. If you respect another religion, there's no wrong religion in that essence. Like, from your standpoint, because I am Muslim, because I have an imam who is not a messenger but an interpreter, is my religion wrong or askew in any context?
I have the utmost respect for Muhammad in the way, after growing up as an orphan in poverty, he makes one of the 5 pillars, almsgiving, giving to the poor. I respect that highly. I think that's absolutely fantastic. Secondly, I respect Muhammad for the way he led the Arab people out of polytheism into monotheism. I think that's outstanding. Obviously, where I disagree with Muhammad is regarding the identity of Jesus Christ. Who is Jesus? Obviously, the Quran teaches that Jesus is not God. He's a good prophet. Obviously, the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John insist Jesus claimed to be God, and he did things as God. He accepted the worship of people as being an appropriate response to him. So obviously, my question for my Muslim friends is, are you sure that Jesus is just a prophet? Obviously, Muhammad was not born till 500 years after Christ, so he never met Jesus. The eyewitnesses insisted Jesus claimed to be God. He accepted worship as appropriate. So, who is Jesus?
I mean, if I look at the lessons of Jesus, like in my room, I have the Bible and then I have the Quran. And I've legitimately started reading both of them and pretty much just putting in my own synthesis as to the comparisons between the two. And as you go through these lessons, you see they are very similar in more than one manner, and probably every single matter except for the fact that Jesus is God or Jesus is not God and he is a prophet. I think that's probably the start, like the largest difference between the two. But if I'm taking those lessons that Jesus gave as a prophet to me, as a God to you, if I take those lessons and I follow them properly, except for the part about Jesus being a God, why would that make me incorrect? And if I am incorrect, does that put me at a lesser heaven or to a hell rather than going to where every, like, I guess, proper Christian would go?
Oh, well, proper Christians deserve to go to hell. The only reason a Christian goes to heaven is because they realize, I deserve hell, but Christ bled and died on a cross for my sin, and I've accepted his sacrifice for me. So proper Christians don't go to heaven because they're proper people. All right? It's all grace.
All right.
And you see, that is a basic contradiction between Islam and Christianity. You know, in Islam, you have to follow the 5 pillars, and you better do it well. And if you do it well, you go to heaven. And if you don't do it well, you go to hell. Jesus Christ says, no, you don't go to heaven by following the 10 Commandments or by following the Sermon on the Mount. You go to heaven because you realize, I am in desperate need of God's forgiveness, his mercy, his grace. And I throw myself upon Christ for that forgiveness, for that grace. You see, so you can't have it both ways. Either heaven is something that we earn and we deserve because we've kept the rules, or heaven is a gift that God gives us by grace.
And so, like, as a Muslim, and so I'm a Shia Ismaili Muslim. I'm about 1% of the whole Muslim population. I'm a really small sect. And the very first line in the Quran, or anything that any of our prayers, is Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of Allah, the most beneficent, the most merciful. And essentially the way that we've been taught that from our Imam, the interpreter, Aga Khan IV, the way it works out is, man will sin, right? Like it's gonna happen no matter what. And the way we've been taught, it is our goal to continuously approach and try to better ourselves, and we do need God for that forgiveness. And to me, it seems like what you preach is the same thing that I've been preached to my whole life.
Okay, except that the question is, how does God forgive? Remember, God is unchanging, right?
Correct.
So you and I both agree, God is unchanging. Well then, if God is unchanging, how does he forgive me for my evil, for my wrongdoing? That's where the cross of Christ is so crucial. Because Christ claims that the evil that I have done has to be punished, because God is just. And forgiveness cannot contradict justice. God's not schizophrenic. At the cross, Christ lays down his life to absorb the just penalty for our wrongdoing, thereby offering us the option of forgiveness if we choose it. See, so obviously in the Quran, the idea of Christ going to the cross is unacceptable, because God would never allow a good prophet to die such a horrible death, right? But in the Gospels, what we have is, they're not biographies. They focus on this cruel, crass death of Christ on a cross. Why do they focus on that? Because Jesus insisted that it's his death on the cross that's the linchpin. It's the key to reconciliation with God. It's the way God forgives us, by absorbing the penalty for our sin, thereby offering us forgiveness. So his justice is honored, and he offers mercy, forgiveness.
So I guess it's kind of like, in closing, right? My fear, the reason I ask this question is because my fear is, as a Muslim, if I don't do the proper things, and if I'm not the right religion, say I'm not, like, say being Christianity is the right religion, and like taking Jesus in, if that is the right thing, but I don't believe it, am I going to hell? And if I don't want to go to hell, should I convert? And if I convert and I do it out of fear, am I still going to heaven because I do it for the wrong reasons? Rather than for forgiveness, I do it for fear?
Okay, good question. All right, we have to be brutally honest with each other. If Muhammad spoke the truth, I am going to hell, because I don't worship Allah, I don't accept Muhammad as his prophet, so I'm going to hell. If Jesus Christ spoke the truth, and I reject Christ, his death on the cross, his deity, then I'm going to hell.
So in this case, you're going to hell and I'm going to hell from each other's standpoints, correct?
Correct.
All right.
According to Muhammad, I am going to hell. According to Jesus Christ, anybody who rejects him is going to spend eternity separate from him. That'll be hell. So, because we're thinking human beings, we had better ask ourselves, what is the truth? And we better follow the evidence. And if the evidence is that Muhammad speaks the truth, we better follow Muhammad. If the evidence is Jesus Christ spoke the truth, we better follow Jesus Christ. Or if the evidence is Siddhartha Gautama Buddha or the avatars of Hinduism spoke the truth, we better follow the evidence. Or if the evidence is that there is no God, we better be atheists.
So then how do we tell, like, between Christianity and Islam specifically, all we have to compare are these two books, correct? We have these two books, we have scriptures that follow both of them.
Good.
We have a history that comes with both of them.
Good.
How do we know which one's evidence is more factual? How do we know which one's is more true? How do I know which one to follow and not end up in the wrong place? Because that is my fear.
Good. Excellent question. First point. We better study both books to find out, are they accurate or not?
Which is what I've begun doing.
Good. And I think the evidence is clear. The Quran is reliable. The Quran has been carefully preserved over the past 1,500 years. If anybody wants to try and maintain that the Quran is inaccurate, they're out to lunch. I am convinced. The evidence is very carefully preserved over the past 1,500 years. You have a very accurate presentation of what Muhammad taught. The same thing is true of the Gospels. Very carefully recorded, a plethora of manuscript evidence to support the reliability. Okay, so we've got two very accurate books, the Quran and the Gospels. Now, obviously, they contradict each other, although there are similarities. Definitely. A lot of similarities, but also contradictions. Okay. So now, the bottom line question is, does the evidence point to the fact that you can trust Muhammad to speak the truth, or does the evidence point to Jesus Christ being trustworthy? Now, here's how I would go about that. Examine life, style. How did Jesus treat women? How did Muhammad treat women? How did Jesus treat his enemies? How did Muhammad treat his enemies? Those types of questions, lifestyle. Second question, ethical teaching. What are the ethical teachings of Muhammad? What are the ethical teachings of Christ? Are there internal contradictions? Or is there an internal consistency? Third question, how did they die? Obviously, in the Gospels, Jesus dies an excruciatingly painful death, forgiving his enemies. Obviously, that demands my respect. Fourth question, what happens after they die? Obviously, in the Gospels, you have an historical resurrection of Christ, and you have eyewitnesses who see him risen from the dead. So, study the two,